Hello there and welcome to the Gummy Yoshi channel. Thank you for clicking on the video, and today I'm going to be giving you some simple tips on how you can improve your trios gameplay and make yourself place better in tournaments like the upcoming Lucky's Trio Cup and even the daily trio tournaments and the trio cash cups that are going to be happening this season. Now, before I jump into the video, I just want to say I am by no means a pro player, so if you want to click off the video because of that, that is okay with me, but I have been VOD reviewing a ton of pro players footage, and I've been looking through it and studying it extensively, so even though I don't have the mechanics to go through and follow and make higher placements for myself, I know that some of you guys who watch these videos have insane mechanics, and you don't even need insane mechanics as long as you have good game sense. And these tips are going to help improve your game sense and hopefully your mechanics. So let's jump right into them. To start it off, before we even get to the in-game stuff, I just want you to think about who you are trioing with. Now, what I want you to think about is, do you have good chemistry with this team? Can you actually work together and not get mad at each other? Because this is probably one of the most critical points to trios, and Fortnite competitive in general is not getting mad. If you do not tilt and you do not rage at the game, you will be in such a better position. Fortnite is basically a 50% mental game and 50% gameplay game. At least that's how I see it. You need to have a good mental state in order to be able to place well in this. That is why all of these top streamers aren't raging every time they die. Even though some of them may look like it, they know how to manage that anger. Then they don't fall into this endless spiral of them just hot dropping, thinking, I need more kills to get more points, I'm falling so far behind, I'm gonna get screwed over by this. And basically what I'm trying to say is that if you tilt, you will do worse. So just make sure that the trio you are with is a good fit for you and that you're all ready to go for this 3-hour tournament, and know that even if your first few games aren't great, you can still make a comeback in the later ones. Now, you are going to definitely need good comms with your teammates. You want to call out every damage marker you do, every movement you take, what guns you have at certain times. You want your team to be informed and have as much knowledge on the enemy as possible. Many of you may not know this, but Fortnite is actually insanely dependent on your knowledge of the enemy. You need to know where they are at a certain time in a build fight. You need to know what HP they're at, so you need good comms for that. One thing I see a lot of players doing is tagging a player for like 35 damage, cracking their shield, and then calling them out at 1 HP. If you crack someone's shield, they're not at 1 HP unless you shoot them like 3 more times. So please don't overemphasize your callouts. I know I do it sometimes even, but it is critical that you make accurate callouts to your teammates so that they know when it's actually important. So now that you have your trio, you're going to want good chemistry with them. You're not going to want to tilt with them, and you're going to need good comms. Those are the 3 things I want you to have with your trio before we even jump into how to play the games. Now we're going to move on to the most important part of the game, in my opinion, the early game. So when you're dropping into the map, the first thing you need is your drop spot. Now, this can be a mythical POI, it can be a completely unknown POI. All you need to do is make it out alive of this spot with enough loot where you can kill at least 1 trio. Now, I feel like that is the requirements for a drop spot. That is my requirements for a drop spot. And basically, here's my thoughts on this. You do not need amazing loot from your first spot. As long as you can outplay another trio and get their loot later on, you will be set. Because all you need is a good shotgun, an AR, and some meds, and you are set for the game. Maybe you won't get as many rotational items as you'd like if you're not landing at one of these mythic POIs, but that being said, at least you're not risking dying off spawn. So sometimes going for the safer play, if your mechanics aren't as strong, is probably a better idea. But if you have insane mechanics and you know it, contesting those mythic POIs can be a really good thing to do. Now, I know I haven't said much about what you're actually supposed to do during the early game, so let's jump into that. The first thing I want to say is that just because a lot of people are saying the charged shotgun is amazing, doesn't mean you have to take it. If you haven't had enough practice with the charged shotgun yet, and you still think you're better with the tac, then take the tactical shotgun. Don't take what's meta just because someone says it's meta. Take what you know you are best with. Take what you know you can fight and win a fight best with. Don't risk taking a charged shotgun just to take a charged shotgun. One other important thing in early game, which I see a lot of people doing wrong, is not holding high ground. When you are in an early game fight, you need to have the high ground. It is crucial. The only times you're going to want to drop off high ground is if you get somebody insanely low and you don't want them to med. Now, holding the high ground is critical in these points because when you've got the high ground, you've got eyes on the entire fight. And when you fight somebody from the low ground, you are risking yourselves being flanked from the rest of the trio. You're being risked from just being sprayed down from above. They can drop on you from your sides. So you always want to hold the height so that you are that person where you've got all of these options and they are stuck on the low ground. Now, you don't want to be 1v3ing on height, obviously. So always make sure you are with your team when you are engaging an enemy team. Do not go sneaking off thinking, I'm going to go 1v3 this team, and then I'm going to show it to my trio, and they're going to be so impressed. No, I know that's dumb logic, but you always want to be with your team during these fights, because no matter how good you think you are, 3 P90s spraying at your box, there's really nothing you can do about that if you're trying to 1v3 them. So you will always want to team fight as long as your teammates are alive. Now, the final thing I want to say on this is just know the layout of your drop spot. If you don't know the layout of your drop spot and the in and outs of it, then you're going to have a much more difficult time fighting there. The reason that players like Benji Fishy, Letchi, Mr. Savage are such a good trio is because they know the entire layout of the authority, so they know every nook and cranny of where they can hide, where they can get a gun, where they can re-med up without being in a dangerous position. So you'll always want to know where you can go and where you can get some loot, and just be safe at your newest drop spot. Sorry, one more final thing I want to say about the early game. You never assume that a player is alone at a drop spot because this is trios, and the other 2 players could be right around the corner, and you don't want to engage in a solo fight here. It is okay if you know you have the weapon advantage. If you just landed and you got attack shotgun and you saw that they got a gray pistol, it is okay to engage them, but make sure to communicate that with your teammates. Communication is a critical point in trios that many trios fail on, and that's why they don't get good placements. So those are my early game tips for trios. Now, if you guys have any more you think that I didn't mention, then feel free to leave them in the comments below. I got all of these from doing many VOD reviews on many pros. One that I just recently did is on Jinx. He played in Lachlan's Oceanic Trio Cup, and they actually came first. So I VOD reviewed all the games for you guys. It took a little bit, but I did learn a lot from it. Let's move on to the mid-game now. The mid-game is a widely debated spot on what you should do during it. Personally, I'm going to give you my opinions on how I have seen many pros succeed during the mid-game, but there are many different strategies that pros take. Now, if you are insanely mechanically gifted, like the top-tier pros, then you can go completely aggro in the mid-game and just outclass everyone by going fight to fight to fight and getting all of the loot in the lobby. But most people don't have these mechanics that the pros have. So my tips here are for less skilled mechanical players that aren't insane like the pros. Now, I'm not saying your mechanics are bad. I'm just saying you'll want to play it a bit more safely. The mid game is a tricky position, especially in these tournaments, because everyone is needing to group up and get pushed into a smaller zone. So whenever you're taking a fight in the mid game, the chances of you getting third-partied skyrocket. You are almost guaranteed to get third-partied if you try and take a fight in the mid game. Now, you always want to have that in the back of your mind. You never want to take a fight in the mid game if your mechanics aren't insane. My mechanics aren't insane, so me and my trio, we're going to be playing a very conservative mid game. You don't want to play like Benji Fishy. Now, I know that sounds contradictory. I know that you want to play like the pros, but Benji Fishy's mechanics are so insane that in the mid game, he can literally go for a kill, get the siphon off of it, and immediately go to another kill. But most of the Fortnite competitive scene doesn't have that good mechanics. Even most other pros don't have these good of mechanics. And in Jinx's games, they played the mid game very safely, and they ended up on top in the Australian servers just from playing these mid games safe so that they could get access to the high point end games. Now, the end games are where you make all your points, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. The mid game is where you're going to want to get all of your materials. Now, if you do not max out your materials in the early game, you'll want to max them out in the mid game. Don't just farm out in the open though. You'll want to set yourself up in zone well so that you can be situated to get to the next zone better. Preferably, being in the center of the zone would be your best location, as then you have to take the shortest distance, or you'll even just get placed into the next zone. Now, once you get near the center or close to the center, depending on how far you had to rotate into the initial zone, you'll want to just box up with your team and get mats. Don't box up in the middle of the open where there's no mat refreshes. You'll want to find a house or something with lots of mats that you can replace your built mats with. I know that sentence was kind of confusing, but basically what I'm saying here is that you'll want to find a house, break down the walls, and then with those extra mats, just rebuild the walls, and you will theoretically be making more mats than you're spending. So you've got a return on investment that is positive. This means that you'll be going into endgame, and if you get zone, you will have a pre-made turtle base, and also your team will be full materials for an easy push onto height where you will get many kills and you'll be able to catch many people on the rotation. So the mid game is a critical point in the game. Even though I think it's not as important as the early game, it is extremely important, as you need to get positioning into the zone so that you're near the center, and then also you'll want to have lots of mats and a safe base. Now, one tip if you do start to get psychoed by an enemy team, do not try to run. I know this sounds contradictory to what I was saying earlier of taking fights, but when you are getting psychoed by another team and they are just W-keying you, they're not going to give up. I hate to say it, but they're not. I was watching all these VODs, and whenever Jinx's team got W-keyed, they had to fight it. And this was the smart play, because if they're caught running, then they're going to get third-partied by other teams. So they had to take the fight and end it as quickly as possible. The quicker you end these fights, the less time there is for you to get third party. Now, this will give you a major advantage, because if you can win this fight, you will be max mats going into the late game, and you'll get an upgrade to your loot and your ammo, just giving your end game a greater chance overall of you winning the game. So those are most of my tips on the mid game. Again, if you guys have any more, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And now we are going to be moving on to probably the most critical spot. I know I said the early game was the most important, but the end game, I'm starting to change my mind. I'm thinking that the end game is the most important spot, so let's move on to the end game. Now, the way you're going to play your end game is going to depend on how you did in the early and mid game. If you landed at a mythical POI, then you are going to be stacked going into the end game, and you are definitely going to want to be looking for height early and looking for picks as people rotate in from the zone. Now, if your loot isn't great going into the end game, you may want to be playing low ground. The low ground is a very risky spot, as it is a place with a lot of people who are in shambles, but also you can get really good refreshes on the low ground, which will give you mats and enough ammo and guns to be able to push for height and actually take it from the people with the mythical items. Now, this is where I'm starting to pull in your mid game to the end game. By this point, if you get the 50-50 zone and you are in the zone when the 50-50 happens, immediately go for high ground. If your team has materials and you just got the 50-50 zone, push for high ground, as you are going to be able to get picks on people who are rotating into the zone, as other people who are outside of the zone are going to have to rotate in. This is your time to get kills as they rotate in. That being said, do not completely tunnel vision these kills. Always be aware of your surroundings and watch out for people who are trying to launch pad onto height or shockwave grenade onto height to try and kill your team. This is where a lot of teams can die in the late game, as they completely tunnel vision kills and they forget about the rest of the game that is going on around them. So basically, to sum up the end game very easily, the endgame is a very difficult spot with many different twists and turns, and I definitely cannot cover them all in one video. If you guys do want to see a video entirely dedicated to endgame, leave that in the comments below and I will start working on it. But in this video, I'm just going to summarize it so it is not too long. But basically, if you have amazing loot, you're going to want to look for height early. That being said, don't forget about kills and mats and refreshes. When you are on high ground, you are going to need refreshes, especially if you are pushing for height during the 50-50 zones, because it's kind of like skybasing. I know, weird reference here, but you are going to run out of materials eventually, so you're going to need refreshes from kills that you can find. So good loot, you're going to want to push for high ground early. If you have bad loot though, playing the mid ground and the low ground is usually the way to go. When you are on the mid ground and low ground, you're going to want to look for kills and just find people who are exposed. Now, your team is going to want to have one dedicated person who tunnels at a time. Keep in mind that in the late game, you're only going to want to tunnel with hard mats if you have them. So brick and metal are your preferable things to tunnel with in the late game. This is just due to the fact that they'll keep you more protected, and they build to a much higher health than wood does. So as this person tunnels into zone, the other two players will look for kills. Now, if you can find a kill, take it. And once you get that kill, if it gives you enough materials and enough items to push for height, take the risk and go for height. High ground is the holy grail of the late game. Everybody wants high ground, so you need to be the one on high ground as the game finishes. From all of the games that I have VOD reviewed, basically 80% of them, the people on high ground have won the game. So the high ground is obviously the best spot to be, and you want to get there as quickly as possible, but don't rush it. I know I just contradicted myself there, but basically, if you have good loot, rush your way up to height and fight people for high ground. If you don't have good loot, wait until you can get better loot and then push up and take that fight and try and dethrone the people from high ground. So this has been my quick coverage of how to improve your trio overall, what to look for during the mid game, early game, late game, and just what to look for in your trio overall. This video took me so long to make, especially with all my VOD reviewing and all the research I put into this. So if you guys could leave a like on the video, that would help me out a ton. Also, subscribing to the channel would be awesome. We are at 70 subscribers right now at the time of making this video, so it is totally amazing. I am almost to 75, so if you want to help me get there, that would help me out a ton. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment on what you think I could have added into this if you have any other ideas, maybe just to help people who are scrolling down through the comments and want more information on this. Also, sorry, I don't mean to keep asking you guys for comments and stuff, but comment if you want me to do a full in-depth tutorial on how to play the endgame based on what current loot you have. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next one. Yeah.